Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take a very quick look at the game Pandemic. Now this game is for 2 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, and the average play time is about 45 minutes. In this game, players are going to be working together to wipe out 4 viruses that are threatening to kill everything on the planet. Let's just take a quick moment to look at the components and see how it's played. As far as the components are concerned, you have this player draw deck over here on the left-hand side. And there's actually 3 different types of cards in this deck. You have these epidemic cards, which serve to increase the infection. You've got these location cards, which match the locations on the board, not shown here. And you've got these special event cards, which serve to give players special buffs or abilities. And they all have the same back, so you can't tell what you're drawing until you actually do so. Now in the middle we have a number of different cubes. You've got yellow, blue, red, and black. These are disease cubes. These serve to track the infections as they make their way around the board. And to go along with that, you've got these little markers here. Players will be trying to find cures for these diseases throughout the game, and they can track the progress via these markers. And they can even flip them over if they've managed to eradicate a virus altogether. Now right beside these cubes is the infection deck. This is basically how these diseases will be spread around the globe. Now along the bottom here, you've got 2 other special markers. These basically track various things on the game board, which I can't show you right now, obviously there's not enough room. But basically they serve to track the infection and the severity of the infection, and to also indicate how many infection cards are drawn on a particular turn. Over here on the right, you've got some other things going on. You've got these research stations. Players will be trying to build these throughout the game. This is where players can actually go to cure diseases. You've got these player pawns here, and these go hand in hand with these cards here. At the beginning of the game, players will be able to choose a special expert. There's operations expert, scientist, medic, dispatcher, and a researcher. And they all have special abilities. And as you can see, each one has a special colored pawn. The card that players choose at the beginning of the game, they'll just simply take the matching pawn to represent their character on the board. Finally, you have these reference cards over here. Each player will receive one of these, and basically they show players what they can do on their turn, what kind of special actions they can take, or what kind of basic actions they can take. Setting up the game can be a little intimidating to the uninitiated, but I'll just do my best to briefly overview it here. The first thing you'll want to do is shuffle the role cards and deal 1 to each player. Now I mentioned earlier that players will be able to pick a role, and that's my personal thing. I mean, I don't mind the kids choosing what role they want. If you want a harder game, you can deal these out randomly, but I see no reason why you couldn't just let people pick who they want to play as. And when players either pick one randomly or pick what role they want, they'll just simply take the pawn of the appropriate color and place it on the Atlantis space, and they'll also be placing one of these research stations there as well. Once players have gotten their characters all sorted out, they'll go ahead and place these 2 markers that I was showing you earlier. This little infection marker goes right on the leftmost 2, and this one here with the arrows go on the Outbreaks track on the 0. Now as far as the other markers I was showing you earlier, these little cure/eradication markers. Basically, you'll just separate the 4 disease cubes out into their own separate piles and place them off to the side of the board. The next thing that you'll want to take care of is the draw deck. And basically, you'll be shuffling all of the cards together with the exception of these epidemic cards. There's 6 of them, and you'll be placing them off to the side for now. And you can actually determine how hard you want to make the game depending on what you pick. Now, before you actually seed these into this deck, each player will be drawing a certain number of cards depending on how many people are actually playing the game. Once that is done, players can go ahead and decide how many epidemic cards they want to actually seed into the deck. 4 makes for an easier game, 5 is about medium, and 6 is difficult. The last thing you'll want to do is address this infection deck. Basically, these cards are all shuffled together. The only thing in this deck are locations. Each card matching a location somewhere on the globe. And basically, you'll shuffle these together, place them on this little area over here, and you'll be drawing 9 of these cards to set up the infection. Basically, the first 3 cards that you draw, you'll take a look at the first 3. In this case, Milan, New York, and Shanghai, and you'll be placing 3 disease cubes of that color onto those spaces. So in this case, there are 3 blue ones that go on Milan over here. There are 3 for New York, which go here. And there are 3 for Shanghai, which is somewhere over here. There we go. 3. There we go. Once you've got those 3 done, you'll draw 3 more. And you'll be placing 2 disease cubes at these locations. So 2 for Paris here. There's 3 here, Lima or Lima, however you pronounce that. There we go. And Santiago in Chile, that is here. Once you're done with those, you draw 3 more, and you'll be placing 1 disease cube at each location. St. Petersburg, Bear, Moscow, there, and Beijing. Alright, and they just simply go into the discard pile for now. Now, while Pandemic is a cooperative game, each player will be taking individual turns, and they'll actually be doing multiple things on their turn. Basically, it's broken up into 3 phases. The first part of their turn, they'll be allowed to take 4 actions. The second part of their turn is they have to draw 2 cards from this draw deck to put into their hand. Finally, they can take on the role of the infector, and that involves drawing a certain number of these cards to infect certain locations on the world. And that's basically all there is to it as far as a player turn. Now, what kind of actions can they take? Well, there's actually quite a number of different ones, but they're all luckily listed right on the reference card. You've got these basic actions here, which basically involve moving. You can drive or ferry to an adjacent location. That just simply means that if there's another space right next to you, shown by a red line, you can just travel right across it to an adjacent city. You can direct flight. You can discard a card to move your pawn to that city. So let's say that this person had Los Angeles in their hand. They could discard this card to move to Los Angeles. Another thing they can do is charter flight. This is the same thing, except you can discard the card showing your current city and move anywhere on the board. So if I had an Atlanta card in my hand, I could discard it and move anywhere on the board that I wanted. Another thing, shuttle flight. Move to a city containing a research station if your pawn is in a city containing a research station. So if I had a research station somewhere over here, I could fast travel from Atlanta, which has a research station, to the other location with a research station. Now, with that said, there are a number of special actions you can take. Again, they're listed on the reverse side of the reference card. You can build a research station, discover a cure, treat disease, or share knowledge. Building a research station simply involves that you discard the card showing your current location or city to build a research station there. So if this player was on Chicago and they had a Chicago card in their hand, they could discard it and place one of these research stations there. Discovering a cure is also pretty easy. They just discard 5 cards of the same color to cure the disease of that color. So if this player had, say, 5 of these yellow cards in their hand, they could discard it and cure that disease. And it's important to note that you must be on a research station in order to do that. And when you do cure a disease, you'll just simply take the marker of the appropriate color and place it down here under the Cures Discovered track. You'll place it on this bottle side up, just to indicate that there is a cure, but the disease is not yet eradicated. And I'll explain the difference in a minute. The other 2 things you can do, treat disease, that simply involves moving your pawn over to a location that has disease cubes on it, and you can spend 1 action point to remove 1 cube at that location. So if this red player over here, or orange player, were on this location, New York, that has 3 disease cubes, this player could spend 1 action to remove 1 disease cube. And if he wanted to spend 3 actions, he could remove all 3 of them. Finally, you have this share knowledge. You can simply pass a card from one player to another. Both players' pawns must be in the city pictured on the card that is passed. Now, as I was explaining earlier, each role card allows a player to do something special, and that is where the special actions and the special abilities tie in. For example, the scientist, you only need 4 cards of the same color to discover a cure. As I mentioned earlier, you'll need 5 cards of the same color to discard them and discover a cure when you're on a research station. However, if you are the scientist, you only need 4. The medic, I was explaining that you can spend 1 action to remove 1 disease cube if there are any at your location. The medic can remove all of the cubes on that location for 1 action, rather than having to take 1 action for each individual disease cube at that location. So, choosing a role at the beginning of the game, if you decide to do that, is a very important step, and you'll need to coordinate with other players so that you can actually build upon each individual strength that each role card allows for. Once the current player has taken all 4 of their actions, they'll draw 2 cards like I was showing you earlier, and they'll also take on the role of the infector. To do that, they'll simply take a look at the number listed here where the marker is, and they'll draw that many cards. Right now the infector, or the infection rate, is on 2, so the current player would draw 2 cards and place 1 disease cube at each of these locations. And then they'll place these into the discard pile. Now, it's worth quickly noting at this point that each location can only hold up to 3 disease cubes. If an infection card is drawn that requires you to add a disease cube to a location that already has 3, let's just say for the sake of argument that Milan was drawn just now on a player's turn, and there's already 3 disease cubes situated there. Well, what will happen is that instead of 1 being placed on top of that location, 1 cube will spread to each adjacent location. So you'd be putting 1 in Paris, 1 in Essen, 1 in actually St. Petersburg is not adjacent. There is no red line going there. However, there's 1 for Istanbul, and it looks like that would be it. Now, multiple outbreaks could occur if that were to happen. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's redo that. But now there are 3 disease cubes in Paris. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Milan was drawn, and we would need to add 1 to Milan accordingly. There's already 3 there, and an outbreak would occur. 1 would go in Essen, 1 would go to Istanbul, 1 would go to Paris. Now, Paris already has 3, so another outbreak would occur. And 1 would then go to London, Madrid, which is adjacent, to Algiers, which is adjacent, 1 to London. Actually, I already did London. 1 to Essen, 1 to, and that would be it. 1 would not travel back to Milan, because that would be unfair. But yeah, multiple outbreaks can occur depending on the situation. And you would count the number of outbreaks that did occur because of that, and move the marker along the outbreaks track. Now, there is a skull down here at the bottom. If this marker happens to reach the skull and crossbones down here at the bottom, everyone in the game loses automatically right away. Now, throughout the game, these epidemic cards will come up. Again, these were seeded into the player draw deck ahead of time. And as these cards come up, a number of things happen. First thing that you'll want to do is increase the infection rate indicator up by 1. That's basically this track here. You'll just simply move that up. And this track actually increases in value as it goes up the track. There's 2, 2, 2, then 3, 3, 4, 4. Again, this determines how many cards you draw when you become the role of the infector on your turn. So if this is all the way up here, each player will be drawing 4 infection cards on their turn at the end of it. So you'll want to keep this number as low as possible. The second thing you'll want to do is draw a card off of the bottom of the draw of the infection draw pile, which is this here. So you take the bottom card off of here, and you'll immediately place 3 disease cubes at that location. Finally, you'll intensify the infection. And basically all that means is that you'll take all of the cards in the discard pile, you'll shuffle them up, and place them right on top of the infection deck. This is to sort of guarantee that places that have already been infected will become infected again. This basically increases the amount of, or the chance of an outbreak occurring. Now, before I was using terms like cure and eradicate, and there's actually a pretty significant difference between the two. When a player trades in 5 cards of the same color for a particular disease, they'll go ahead and cure it, and they'll put that cure marker down here. Now, a cure marker does not prevent cubes from spreading around the board via this infection deck. So as infection cards are drawn for a cured virus, it'll continue as normal. The benefit to having a cured disease, however, is that the current player can cure all of the disease cubes at a location for the cost of 1 action rather than 1 action per disease cube, sort of like the medic special ability. So if red was over here and there's 2 disease cubes here and yellow was cured, for 1 action this player could then eradicate both cubes. Now, in order to eradicate a disease, all of the cubes of that color must be eliminated from the board, and then you could flip over this cured marker to the eradicate side. Now, if any infection cards come up of that color, no new disease cubes will be seated onto the board. Now, the game can end in a few different ways. Basically, there's a lot of ways to lose and only one way to win. You can lose the game, as I was showing you earlier, if this marker along the Outbreaks track reaches the skull and crossbones. That's one way to lose. If this draw pile runs out and a player can't draw from it, players will lose. If players try to grab from the available diseases over here on the left and they can't, if all of them are in use somewhere on the board and they can't seed anymore, they lose that way. However, in order to win, you'll need to cure all 4 of these diseases. You'll have to have these 4 markers down here like so. You don't have to eradicate them, you just have to find cures for all 4. You can eradicate them if you want to increase your chances throughout the game, but all you're required to do is find a cure for all 4. If all the players manage to do that, they win the game as a collective. And there you have it. This is just a very brief look at the game Pandemic. I didn't cover all of the rules found in the manual, but this should give you a general idea as to how the game is played. You can check out my review at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com, or you can simply click on the link in the below description. That'll take you there as well. This is Vince. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.